Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to the podcast that covers numerous topics, all related to the commercial vehicle ecosystem. I'm your host, Steve Henning, and no matter the time of day or where you're joining us from, we thank you for being here. I'm really excited about our guest today. It's John Harris, the founder and CEO of Harbinger. John, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Steve.
Thanks so much for carving out a little time, and I see you've got a pretty busy background there, so looks like you're on the factory floor and doing a little business there.
I am. This is our manufacturing plant in Garden Grove in Southern California. And behind me, you can see battery module production.
Well, that's outstanding. The business getting done. I love it. So maybe let's start here for our audience that perhaps isn't familiar with Harbinger. Could you just take us, give us a little insight as to who is Harbinger, and really, why did you decide to focus on medium-duty vehicles specifically?
Well, Harbinger is a medium-duty vehicle OEM. We are today the most vertically integrated truck OEM in the world in electrification. And we focus on medium-duty because it's where we see a real opportunity to make a better product. I think people have this sort of attachment to electrification that they think the goal is just, let's go electrify stuff. But that's not really good enough. You have to electrify things where the product makes sense as electric, but more importantly, you actually have to build a better product. And in medium duty, we saw the clearest opportunity to build a far better product that happens to be electric. And I think that people don't understand how important it is to approach the market that way. There's a lot of categories where there are simply great products in the market. There may not be an electric product yet, but unless we see an opportunity to really make something that is just a far better solution for a customer, it's just not really worth our time to attack that market. So medium duty is where those things really intersect.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And a better product, who would have thought that was the right way to go? That sounds like an excellent approach. So with all the, I guess, things in the news, changes in the federal administration earlier this year, obviously that's resulted in federal government kind of moving away from EV incentives, maybe things like range anxiety, charging infrastructure. Some people might wonder, gosh, is now really the right time to buy an EV? What would you say to those people about why an EV and why now specifically?
Well, I think that's why our approach to that market is so important. If your goal is just to build the best EV, that presupposes that an EV is the thing that someone needs or that someone wants. And for a lot of people, that's true, but not for everyone. And I think as you move farther and farther into the commercial segment and away from class one passenger cars, it's not that people aren't looking for an EV, it's that isn't really their framework for analyzing the product. They want a product that is cheaper to operate. They want a product that is more reliable. They want a product with better safety. And they don't necessarily care if that product is an EV. They just want better cost, better reliability, and a safer workforce. So when we have this kind of political shift, all the companies and the people who were kind of in this prism of what do we do in electrification, they're really exposed when that happens. If you've taken a very product first approach around how do we build the best product for our customers, it sets us up to be much more insulated from those changing winds. And I think our hybrid product is a great example of that. We introduced our first hybrid product last year in the fall with Thor, the leading RV company. And then we just rolled that out for our commercial customers at ACT this year. And that was, I think we were sort of waiting to see how the market responded to that, because we were introducing a combustion product. And we're an EV company rolling out a combustion product rather than the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is that for some meaningful set of our customers that are needing to go 300 or 400 miles a day, or that have a lot of volatility in their daily use, or that have unpredictable access to charging, a range extended product was clearly the right product. And so we we sort of go where the customers take us.
Well, that seems like an incredibly smart approach. And you talked a little bit about different customer types. So I think you mentioned, a customer that might have to go a few hundred miles a day. I've certainly heard, conversations about maybe somebody has a fairly set route, such as a delivery vehicle, those kind of things, essentially use cases, if you will. And to me, it's always been interesting when you think about it that way. It's very similar to the trades and vocations. If you're an electrician or a plumber, it's all about getting the right tool for the job. If you need a wrench, well, a screwdriver or a hammer is not going to cut it. Very similarly, if you need a vehicle that will address certain needs, what you really care about is that it addresses those needs. Does it matter if it's an electric vehicle or an ICE vehicle or diesel or whatever the case might be? Probably not. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think we started with the sort of low-hanging, obvious use cases for electrification. We built a product that would meet those needs as sort of a core product.
Mm-hmm.
And then we started looking more broadly and saying, well, how can we help with your needs? How can we help with this, maybe not edge case, but maybe there is fruit on the tree other than the lowest branches.
I've not heard it put that way before, but I really like that example. That's terrific.
I think we have to remind people of that sometimes, that electrification, I think, has been poorly served by an absolutist viewpoint, both at the vehicle OEM side and at the fleet side. I think we've got OEMs who are sort of saying, like, we have to get rid of all the other products. This is the only thing we can do. And we also have fleets who, I think, with good intentions, come in and say, like, well, how do we electrify 100.0% of the fleet?
Mm-hmm.
And again, that's sort of a nice thing to aspire to in some number of decades. But that ends up being a huge stumbling block to most people, because there's a solid, if we look at a parcel fleet, like, we can electrify 70% of that parcel fleet today, and it's easy. It's straightforward. But the people who are really fixated on the 100% solution, like, they've spent 5 years trying to solve the 100th percentile, and they've spent 5 more years of fuel and maintenance and kind of going farther down an expensive path because they've been hesitant to do anything in the meantime.
That's a good point as well. It reminds me of somebody I worked for years ago, and we were talking about, I guess, if you think you get up in the morning and you need to head to the office to work, are you going to wait for every light to be green on your route before you leave?
Exactly.
The answer is no. Right? Very similar. If you're looking to electrify, maybe you start out with a percentage and find that percentage that fits your business and keep the other types of vehicles, and you can have a mixed fleet. That's not unheard of at all. And that seems to be what you're saying.
I think that mixed fleet is going to be the reality for a long time. I think the percentage is going to change. For any given fleet today, the answer is going to be some split. Let's call it 60-40.
Mm-hmm.
And 10 years from now, it's probably going to be 70-30. But it's probably always going to have a combustion chunk. Over time, that'll probably flip from legacy combustion to hybrids.
Mm-hmm.
But for all the kind of great battery technology we have here, it's really hard for me to tell anyone with a straight face that I think we can make you a really compelling, fully electric 500-mile range product. Like, not today, not in 2030, not because the technology isn't there, just because it's not very cost effective for those kind of ranges.
Well, and when it comes to business, right, what's one of the main things you look at is the bottom line and what's most effective for my business. You seem to hit it right on the head there. So maybe, and I feel like you've addressed at least some of this, but I'll just ask the question directly. What would you say is the biggest misconception today that buyers have, and that's holding them back from even exploring an EV for their fleet or their business?
I'll say one of two things: either that mindset, but you can carry that mindset out to any piece of the deployment. I think with charging in particular, it's a big holdback. People are approaching a given depot and saying, I've got 300 vehicles at this depot. Let's make a plan for 300 chargers.
Mm-hmm.
And let's go buy 300 chargers. and let's bring power for 300 chargers. And I look at that and say, that's totally crazy. Like, you have lost the war from the first battle if you take that approach. If we've got 300 trucks at that depot, I think most people in our segment are running between an 8 and a 12-year replacement interval. With the bigger fleets, I guess I won't say bigger. It varies in that range. But that means out of those 300 trucks, like, we should really be looking at 60 chargers and sort of doing a 18 to 24 month tempo of, like, let's do 30, then let's get some trucks, then let's do 60, then let's get some trucks, and just keep bringing those out in waves, because no one's going to replace all the trucks at a fleet in one shot. Like, that's going to be absolute chaos. Right. So why spend the money on the power and the charging and the site work? Like, theoretically, sure, it's cheaper to do it all at once, but the discounted cash flow of that is immediately going to blow up that assumption, because if we need this stuff over 5 years, sure, it's 10% cheaper to do it all at once, but I'd rather have that money for 4 of those years than do it up front and save 10%. So I think that's one. And the second thing is a lot of assumptions about battery life. And that one surprised me that that's still sort of a thing. And when people started really rolling out EVs in quantity with the Model S, there was this, I would say, accepted fact that we'll obviously have to replace all the batteries after 5 years, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And now there's some huge mass of Model S's with 10 to 12 years on them, and the batteries are all fine. So, we think what we're building is a 20-year vehicle, because that's what you buy if you're looking for something in the segment. It's not a 20-year battery yet, but I think it's probably about a 15-year battery. And we have a 10-year battery warranty with unlimited miles. So that's not a theoretical position we're taking. The warranty is 10 years, unlimited miles. And we feel very comfortable with that on the battery, not on every piece of the vehicle. But again, the expensive thing that people worry about.
Hopefully we've gotten at least some people past some of those misconceptions they have about EVs overall. Now, why would you recommend, okay, you're ready to look at an EV, why Harbinger? Why should I look at and buy a Harbinger vehicle?
So I feel like you're setting the bar too low there. If you've already decided on an EV, then it's not really a hard choice. If you're looking at an EV, what Harbinger builds here is a full chassis. We're building the chassis, we're building the battery, we're building the drivetrain, we're building really all the complex bits. So in a Harbinger chassis, you have a Harbinger suspension system, Harbinger axles, Harbinger brakes, Harbinger electric motor, Harbinger transmission. And all of that enables us to build a product that's at an appropriate cost. So when you look at a Harbinger medium duty truck next to a workhorse truck or an Exos truck, or if you're really a glutton for punishment, maybe an MT50E, we're about 50 to 60% cheaper than those products. So it's not a close call. Again, now you're asked the question of if you've decided on the electric truck.
Right.
And the reason we're so much cheaper is because you're buying Harbinger content. You're not handing us your money and then having us distribute profit to 5 layers of supply chain below us. And we're not paying for like the receptionists at the Dana plant in the Midwest. It all sort of rolls downhill to this super inefficient system around electric trucking right now. I think the more interesting question is, if you're trying to buy a medium duty truck, why buy a Harbinger truck?
Okay.
And it really comes down to building a vehicle that's just far more modern, far more reliable, far more durable, and is built in the 21st century. And when we look at maneuvering a Harbinger van through a parking lot, we have about a 50% smaller turning circle than competitive products. It's got nothing to do with electrification, right? That's suspension and steering design. But if you're operating a delivery vehicle, you probably care a lot about that, right? You're
I
going to
think so.
hit less parked cars. You're going to have less hand over hand steering maneuvers. You're going to be faster through that route.
Mm-hmm.
And features like better maneuverability, better braking, better visibility, have got nothing to do with electrification. It's just about building a better vehicle.
I think you might have convinced me.
Great.
But I heard a little bit about a partnership with Convoy.com, the national commercial vehicle marketplace. And I'm kind of curious if you could maybe share what that means for your customers and what that means for Harbinger, what the expectation is there.
Well, I mean, we know Convoy is a crucial platform for our customers to learn about new products, to find the right channels, to find the right dealers to work with. So for us, that's all about getting the product out there and making it easier for new customers to discover us through the channels they already use and are familiar with.
Okay. Well, that makes total sense to me. One last question for you, again, trying to be respectful of your time. And I know you carved out some time for us today, and we sure do appreciate that. But if we look at the history of, I guess, EVs and EV manufacturing and production and companies and so forth, there's been a lot of startups in this space, in the medium duty segment specifically, with, quite frankly, some pretty high expectations. Some of those have made significant promises, raised a lot of money, most likely, but ultimately closed down. Not sure that it, necessarily asking you to comment on that, but more about Harbinger and your approach and how that's different from all of those others. Could you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the real pain with this industry is that money was spent and people didn't really see the value. Those companies didn't produce the vehicles or the results they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
Our approach has been primarily to be extremely focused. At Harbinger, we build one product today, a strip chassis. And that's kind of a niche product. Strip chassis find their way into delivery vans, RVs, some school buses, but it's not a product for everyone. And so the tendency at many of those earlier companies has been, well, we need the product to meet everyone's needs. And we need, 3 or 4 factories, and we need all of these sort of extra distractions and projects, and we need a Formula One team, and the list goes on and on.
Right.
But what we're doing here is fundamentally a really difficult project. It's a difficult challenge to build a new vehicle. We don't want to make that challenge more difficult by giving ourselves 3 or 4 other challenges to attack simultaneously. So we've got to focus on the challenge worth solving. We've got to solve it methodically and then move to the next one. And we also have to really sit down and decide, when we're planning where to spend our money, where can we spend that money to make a difference? Where can we develop something that solves a pain point for customers? And I think for us, we've spent most of the money attacking energy efficiency, durability, and driver comfort. So we didn't, for example, develop our own 6-axis robots. We haven't attempted to customize the chemistry and industry-leading battery cells. We haven't attempted to develop a new generation of ECUs. Because in all of those cases, what we have access to is a great product already. We have access to Panasonic's battery cells, and that's sort of as good as anyone's going to do. Which sounds obvious, but many of the examples that you're sort of thinking of, people didn't get there. They were like, well, we should obviously change all the chemistry by 10% because we know more about this than the people who've been doing this for decades. So I think we were also beneficial to have a team with a lot of really deep passenger car development experience, where the customer expectations are, I think, higher and more demanding as far as comfort. So one of the things that we started with was saying, what is the right front end architecture for this vehicle? And if you just went out and looked at other trucks, you would have come back and say, well, obviously we'll use a leaf spring suspension and a steer axle. And that was, I guess, a fine answer in like 1935. But in 2020 or 1980, it's sort of hard to understand why that is the answer for so many people. So we brought in a double-wishbone suspension, completely built here in-house from scratch, And the result is the vehicle has much higher ground clearance, lower weight, better driver comfort, and back to that maneuverability. So there's a need to focus on solving the narrowest set of problems that make a difference, but only solving problems that do make a difference, and not going out and reinventing the wheel.
Imagine that, right? Focusing on one thing, knowing what that one thing is, and then providing a solution for it. That's a way to differentiate yourself for sure.
Doing the obvious stuff is always a clever strategy, but oftentimes people pass by.
They do. They absolutely do. Well, John, thanks so much for giving us your time this afternoon and chatting with us a little bit about the EV space and medium duty vehicles overall, and specifically Harbinger. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and got to tell you, I feel like I've learned a lot, so I'm sure our audience will as well.
Well, thanks. It's great talking to you, Steve.